Morning, everyone. I hope that you're well during this current time. I was meant to be interviewing Grace Meadows from Music for Dementia this morning. Unfortunately, she's unavailable, so you're stuck with me for one more week. But I wanted to still hop on to record this video, this podcast, if you're listening as an audio. And I wanted to talk today about meaningful music and what it actually means to deliver meaningful music and what makes music meaningful. This obviously is applicable to all of us. So whilst, I do talk about music in dementia care, that's my specific area of expertise. But actually this notion that music can be meaningful is applicable to everybody. And that's sort of what I wanted to be talking about today. I will be touching upon dementia care, obviously, as well. Those of you that know me quite well know that I can't talk about music without linking to dementia care because it's just so embedded in me and at the heart of everything that I do. But something that came out of last weekend, we had the National Album Day. Hopefully you were able to follow it. There was a lot of promotion around it on social media. And the theme was 80s. And what I discovered was that so many more people were coming out talking about music that's meaningful to them, certain albums and the memories that they still have associated with those albums, and people that at a personal level, people that I maybe didn't know very well, or I did know really well, but we'd never spoken about music and their memories. And at a personal level, I learned so much more about people through this National Album Day and learning about music that was meaningful to them. I was born in 1988, and there were other people my age and younger that still have really strong associations to 80s music. I think that in itself was really interesting. That so many decades later, we're still connecting with music from the 80s, and I'm always wondering whether current music will stand the test of time in the same way. But the conversations, so I'm bringing back to this notion of meaningful music, and the conversations that were coming out of National Album Day were just incredible. So for example, the company that my husband works for, as far as I'm aware, they've never had a group conversation around music. It's never, they don't work in the music industry, and it's never been a big point of conversation. But last weekend, one of the managers put out a post about, apparently it's National Album Day. The theme is 80s. What albums did you really like from the 80s? And naturally I hopped on to see what people were putting, because I love this kind of thing. This is my passion. This is what I talk about day in, day out. But we don't all talk about it. So I was quite intrigued to see, Saturday was a bit of a catalyst to get people to look into this. And it was great to see what people were sharing, the more mainstream 80s albums and the more kind of unique, controversial is the wrong one, but you know what I mean, the not so kind of mainstream, the more off the hook records. And it was brilliant to see how people were having conversations around this, especially when people were talking about live music. So a lot of people mentioned about Depeche Mode and their Violator album. Big album. Nowadays, like, we all still love listening to that album. I've only recently discovered it, if I'm honest, and it's a brilliant album. I'm really enjoying listening to it. But we found that people were talking about when they saw the Violator tour, and I'm trying to think now where they said they saw it, but there were people that realised that they were at that same gig, obviously many years ago, didn't know each other back then. But people were sharing just how fantastic that experience was, and I find that really fascinating, is that there's a shared experience in that you're sharing the experience right now of talking about the music that is meaningful and the memories. But there's also that shared experience of realising that you literally did share that experience with each other 30 decades ago, which is, I find that really fascinating. Sorry, those of you that want a podcast, I was just sipping my coffee. Which, by the way, is something that I'm going to look at launching in November, is a live stream chat over tea, over coffee, over a beer if we want to do it one of the evenings. But basically where I'll come onto probably Instagram live and chat about music, chat about well-being. It won't be dementia specific, but I will be talking about dementia, and I'll be there to answer any questions that you might have around music, health and well-being. So that was quite a nice unplanned segue into that new feature that I'm going to be launching in November. I'll be putting out posts over the next few weeks to see what time might be good for everybody, and the kind of what the format of that might look like. Okay, so coming back to meaningful music, I was obviously talking about National Album Day and the amazing conversations that were coming out of that, and how I think it goes back to this point that I talk about often, is that it's not just about the music itself. It's about everything else that comes with it. So the memories associated, other senses, how it makes you feel. So it's going back to that notion of, music can bring back, can recreate positive feelings associated with positive memories. And that's, that is applicable to all of us. So I'll very briefly tell you one example. So, or maybe a couple of examples. But the other day, Chris Hawkins on BBC Six played Time of Your Life, Good Riddance by Green Day. And I must admit, I'm trying to think what time this was, probably about 7:15. I was rushing to get the kids ready for nursery. We leave home at 7:30, and I always find that last kind of 15 minutes of getting ready, it's always a bit frantic, and I'm rushing around, and it's kind of trying to gather my thoughts and get into the day is tricky. But I just happened to come into the kitchen at the time that Time of Your Life started playing. I even think about it now, I'm starting to get choked up. But I suddenly was transported back to a time when I was a teenager. So I was 15. I'd gone away on a weekend residential with my class and with, I think, 2 other schools from around the country. We all came together for a weekend residential. It had a mixture of creative activities, meditation. There was actually the thing that spurred me to realise the importance of meditation in my own life. We had time to reflect. We were coming towards the end of school, so year 11. I was just about to move down to Devon, so moving from Essex to Devon, which obviously was a big change, and all the emotions that kind of come with that the time of your life anyway. But those feelings are still very very deep in me, very raw, I suppose. It's quite easy for certain pieces of music to transport me back to that period in time. But what happened over that weekend was that, I started to feel that I was finding my way in the world a little bit more, kind of understanding my self-identity. Here I was, the grunge. I used to wear denim jeans with patches that I'd sewn on them. I'd wear DMs. I didn't ever feel like I fitted into my Essex school. I felt that I didn't kind of belong in that place, and that's hard as a teenager. We all feel like that. I think to a certain extent. But one of the leaders was saying, because I think I'd kind of spoken about this. I don't feel I fit in. I don't really know who I am, because who I feel I am doesn't fit in, and I don't really belong. And this leader said to me, what other people think of you is none of your business. And I must admit, that really took me aback. And I was like, what the hell? But it stuck with me. And actually, as I've become older, I've really leaned into this idea of, what other people think of you is none of your business. That's their own thing, and that not everybody's going to like you. You're not going to like everybody else. And it's a life lesson. It's something that I was told at 15, but took a long time to kind of take on board. I'm a people pleaser. But I also, I acknowledge that we're all very unique, and that you don't have to try and fit into this this box. So sorry, very long story short, over that weekend we kind of had that that idea that was kind of instilled in me. I was learning more about myself, about what it meant to take care of my own well-being, that kind of thing. And Green Day's Time of Your Life was a song that we chose. I think someone in the group knew it. They chose that for kind of the theme tune for that weekend. And I think we did on the last day we had like a photo slide of all of the photos taken from the weekend, and Time of Your Life was the soundtrack for it. And then a friend also reminded me a couple of days ago that it was used at our leavers mass as well when we left school. So that song is quite poignant for me. But when it came on the radio at that 7:15, in the midst of this kind of chaos, trying to get the kids out of the door, hearing that on the radio, it did stop me in my tracks, and I stayed and I listened. Luckily I was able to listen to that whole song, all 2.5-3 minutes of it. And I mean, the words are really poignant. So if you don't know the song, do check it out and go and listen to the lyrics. It's all about kind of, endings, which is why it surprises me when it's used as a wedding song, because it is around endings. And so for me, it was, that kind of closing the chapter of being at school and, now finishing GCSEs and kind of, coming out to the other side of that and all of the emotions. But when I hear that song, it transports me back to that. And so that's what I mean by a piece of music that's meaningful. It has meaning to it. You have potentially past memories associated with it, but it can be more than that. New music can be meaningful. It's something that elicits emotions, and not necessarily positive emotions either. You'll have music that's meaningful to you that reminds you of loved ones that have passed away, or reminds you of heartbreak. That music can still be meaningful. I think in dementia care, we can focus so much on music that brings positive emotions, and yes, this is really important, but actually let's not forget music that might bring about negative emotions, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's a negative reaction. I might need to unpick that a little bit. Say, for example, you are caring for someone whose husband or wife has passed away. It doesn't mean that they don't necessarily want to listen to music that would remind them of their loved one. Obviously, this is very individual, and you have to have a conversation around this and finding out what they as an individual would want. But you might find that by playing music that reminds them of their loved ones, you can bring back the feelings of those happier times. If you're playing songs from their wedding, or times when their children were little, or a particular holiday, you can be recreating feelings from that moment in time. And I often talk about it's not a negative thing if we cry. And an outpouring of emotions doesn't necessarily mean that we should stop the music, we should stop the conversation. But actually, it's all about making a safe space where we can express our emotions, and knowing the individuals that you care for so much, and really deep, and you're connected, that whether right now this is appropriate or not, and you understand how you should go forward with using this music in this way. So I just wanted to come on to open up this conversation around meaningful music, to get us thinking in our own lives, what is meaningful to me? So for example, off the back of listening to Time of Your Life by Green Day, that day I was like, I'm gonna lean into these feelings of that going back to being a teenager. What did I listen to at that time? So I went to listen to Let Go by Avril Lavigne. I don't know if anyone remembers her album, but Oh, of course. That's sorry. That's a really silly thing to say. Most of us will remember the Let Go album, I think, and it was a great album for my kind of generation. So it came out when I was 13. I listened to it all the time. I think when I was around that age, if I had an album that I liked, I really liked it, and I listened to it all the time in the car, on the bus. I'd listen to albums when I was going to sleep, which, yes, I must admit, sometimes I'd wake up and the headphones would be all tangled, and and I'm sure a lot of us did the same. I'd listen to the radio, so like Virgin FM. I used to listen to that a lot before I went to bed. It's a huge part of my life. So when I listen back to those albums that I listen to on repeat, on loop, all day, every day, I can't help but recreate these feelings and emotions associated with that period of my life. So I went back and listened to Avril Lavigne's Let Go. But going back to this idea of just getting us all to be thinking about, what is meaningful to you? What particular albums, what particular artists, who did you used to listen to when you were in your 20s, 30s, your teenage years? Thinking back to what's meaningful, sharing that with other people, post on your social media, drop a friend an email to say, a certain piece reminded you of them. You make your own playlists if you don't already have one. I love that activity, and actually my children now are starting to create their playlists as well, which I love. So often we'll be in the car and my 6-year-old daughter, she'll ask me how to spell something. And then I realise it's because she's on my phone and she's making a playlist. So, for example, in the last week, she's created a playlist called Funky One and a playlist called Cheesy World. And they've got some brilliant songs on there that she's just kind of gone through, searched for songs that she knows, and then gone onto the song radio and found new songs that she's discovered. So, why don't we all do this? It's free to create playlists, even if you're not using a streaming service like Spotify. You can write it down, look online. Nowadays it's the amount of resources available to us to access music is just incredible. And like I said, it doesn't just have to be music that you have previous associations with. I love listening to BBC Six at the moment, and I've discovered so much more music. I'm listening to more new artists, new tracks, new albums. It's really opened up my mind. And that can still be meaningful. So I now have a lot of songs that are new to me, but they're meaningful because they've promoted a certain type of feeling in me, and when I listen to them again, likelihood is that I'll have formed new memories that first time that I heard that piece of music, that then the next time I hear them it will keep coming back. So do discover new music, do go back to old favourites, share with other people. Let me know. I love hearing about everybody's musical tastes, what meaningful music is to you. And I think that's what I want to finish on, is that meaningful music is so subjective. It really is up to the individual and what makes music meaningful for you as an individual. So I hope that you enjoyed today's episode, and I hope you have a fantastic week, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Take care.